Hello, my name is Quentin Johnson. I am the coordinator of the Training and Technical Support Group of the Food Fortification Initiative. In this module, I will cover the topic of internal monitoring. Internal monitoring refers to quality management procedures, actions and tests carried out by flour millers in order to manufacture fortified flour properly and to ensure a high-quality product for consumers. As a reminder, the two components of internal monitoring include quality assurance and quality control. Quality assurance is all about the process of fortification. It is comprised of activities that are put in place to maintain safety and to avoid mistakes during production. The aim is to create a product that will adhere to the fortification standard and general food safety requirements as well. If you equate fortifying flour to taking an exam in school, anything that is done by the student to increase the likelihood of a good grade would be considered QA. For instance, studying, thoroughly reading the test directions, not rushing through the questions, etc. Quality control is comprised of activities that are conducted on flour after production to document that the end product complies with the fortification standard before making it available to consumers. Thinking back to our student test analogy, QC is like a student reviewing his or her answers to be sure they are correct before turning the exam in to the professor. To get you thinking, below is a list of activities that should be labeled as quality assurance or quality control. This list is also available to the resources section of the module as a worksheet. Remember, QA is about the process of fortification and QC is about reviewing the end product. Pause the video and take a couple of minutes now to see if you can label them correctly. Now let's go over the answers together. Firstly, QA covers the points in this slide, namely using only premix that is provided by a certified supplier and accompanied by a certificate of analysis, or COA. Storing premix appropriately and using it by the expiration date. Installing and maintaining a quality feeder. Checking premix feed rates. Packaging, labeling and storing fortified flour according to specifications of the fortification standard, and verifying premix usage against production of flour that should have been fortified. It's important to remember that only the categorization matters, not the order of the points listed in the slide. Now, quality control. Quality control confirms that flour is fortified using qualitative tests, confirming with quantitative analysis that the amount of each micronutrient in the fortified flour is within the allowable range according to the fortification standard. For the rest of the module, we will talk in depth about each QA and QC activity. First up, quality assurance activities. Our first QA procedure is to make sure that we are using premix that has been provided by a certified supplier and accompanied by a certificate of analysis. In the previous module, Helena talked about certified premix suppliers. As a reminder, GAIN has published a list of suppliers that consistently produce high-quality premix based on a third-party audit. Each time a shipment of premix is delivered to a flour mill, the employee in charge of receiving the product must go through the following steps. Step 1. Assess the condition of the package received for damage. Step 2. Review the premix package details to ensure that the right product was received. Step 3. Record the product name, lot number, and expiration date on the mill's premix intake form. Step 4. Remove and file the receiving label. Step 5. File a copy of the certificate of analysis. A hard copy may be sent by the premix manufacturer along with the shipment, or it may be sent electronically. Once the intake procedures are done, some countries will place an approved sticker on the box like the one that you see here. The Certificate of Analysis is a document endorsed by a competent authority. It certifies that each lot of premix or flour contains the required micronutrients and complies with the country's fortification standard and relevant specifications. Let's look at one together. Here is a certificate of analysis for premix received by a mill in the United States of America. At the top of the picture you will see the date of the report, the product name and ID, the lot number, and the product weight. In the middle is a chart that lists the types of micronutrients, the analysis results, and the minimum and maximum specifications as required by the country. At the bottom, the certificate of analysis includes the premix particle size, information about wheat allergens, the date of the premix production, and the premix expiration date. Please note that the details provided in a certificate of analysis may vary slightly by company. Some countries choose to prepare an approved premix supplier list as part of the startup process for a fortification program. In South Africa, regulatory authorities update the approved premix supplier list periodically and even make visits to premix facilities on occasion. This list takes the burden of decision-making off the millers and makes importing premix more efficient. It is developed by the entity that has jurisdiction over the premix, such as a Food and Drug Authority, and should be provided to the millers and to customs officials. The second QA activity is storing premix appropriately and using it by the expiration date. Premix should be kept in a cool and a dry storage facility where the boxes are placed on pallets to allow ventilation. It should also be away from direct sunlight. Boxes should be arranged in a way that facilitates using the oldest premix first. This is called the first in, first out, or FIFO system. Before boxes are stored, they should be labeled. For example, if you already have boxes marked A, then the next batch to arrive would be marked B. This method supports easy identification. The movement of boxes to the flour production area will start with all the boxes labelled A, followed by those labelled B, and so on. Some flour mills will use an entire bag of premix at one time. If you only pour a portion of the bag into the feeder hopper, reseal the bag and place it back in the original box. Doing so prevents exposure to light and air, which can cause certain micronutrients to degrade quickly. All premix should be used, whether opened or unopened, by the best if used by or expiration date provided by the supplier. The third QA procedure is installing and maintaining a quality feeder, especially one that allows for the delivery of premix to be tied to the flow of flour. A feeder is the primary means by which fortificants are added to wheat flour. The feeder hopper, which is what you see in the picture, is the part that holds the premix. If your premix adds enzymes and/or improvers to flour, it is important to keep those ingredients separated from the premix in storage and in use. They must not be combined in the same feeder. Before purchasing and installing a feeder, millers need to consider the following: the feeder type, whether the premix will be added to flour in batches or continuously, the mechanism by which premix will be measured, and the premix delivery method. I will talk about each of these in turn. First, the type of feeder. There are three types of feeders shown in this slide: primarily used in flour mills. The first one is the screw feeder, the second one is the revolving disc feeder, and the third one is the drum or roll feeder. The most commonly produced feeder today is the screw type, which has several advantages over the other kinds, including ability to sustain a constant feed rate, a wider range of feed rate options, larger hopper capacity, fewer mechanical parts, and easier to clean and to maintain. Secondly, whether premix will be added in batches or a continuous manner. For batch addition, a batch mixer is used. The batch mixer is filled with a large amount of flour. Premix is added all at one time, either manually or by a feeder directly into the mixer. The amount is dependent upon the entire quantity of flour in the mixer. For continuous addition, premix is released into the flour stream in an ongoing manner using a feeder. The amount of premix to add is dependent upon the flow rate of the flour stream. The premix feed rate must be validated often to ensure the proper amount of vitamins and minerals are being released and added as the premix to the flour. Thirdly, the mechanism by which premix will be measured. The premix can be measured volumetrically or by weight. The mechanics of volumetric addition are similar to using a cup or spoon to measure ingredients for baking bread at home. Feeders that operate volumetrically must be regularly monitored and adjusted to coincide with the flour production flow rate. The minimum acceptable error is plus or minus 3%. Loss in weight feeders are placed on load cells on the top of a scale. These communicate with the mill's control system. The premix feed rate adjusts automatically by taking into account the premix weight loss as product is discharged and the flow rate of the flour is measured. This type of feeder is recommended for new mills as the cost is minimal compared to the overall cost for constructing a mill and the dosage is more precise. Lastly, is the method by which premix is delivered to the flour. Premix that is released via a feeder can be added to flour by way of gravity or by a force of air. For gravity-based delivery, feeders are placed directly above the flour conveyor. The premix dribbles down into the flour stream in small amounts as flour flows through the conveyor. This type of feeder needs to be placed at least 3 to 4 meters from the final discharge end to ensure that the fortificants are sufficiently distributed throughout the flour. For pneumatic delivery, a force of air blows premix into the flour stream. Feeders that utilize this type of method can be placed anywhere in the mill. That is obviously a nice advantage. However, such systems require more equipment and are less effective at incorporating the premix with the flour evenly. In addition to the feeder, millers are strongly urged to install a low-level indicator at the bottom of each feeder hopper, which will indicate with an alarm that the premix is running low in the hopper, and b, an electric or electronic interlock system. An interlock system causes the feeder to stop if the flour conveyor halts. This prevents overtreatment of the flour with premix. For gravity-based delivery, the interlock system should be installed between the feeder motor and the motor driving the flour conveyor. For pneumatic delivery, an interlock system should be installed between the feeder and the blower to ensure that the two components always operate simultaneously. Prior to using the feeder for the first time, it needs to be calibrated. The next few slides will cover this topic. The first step, as you see here, is to confirm the flour production flow rate. This is typically done at 1 or 2 points in the continuous system. If fortifying in the mill, check the flour production scales and confirm by check weighing if possible. If fortifying at the packaging and loadout stage, check the scales of the flour transfer system in which the flour will be fortified and confirm with a weigh-off if possible. In a batch system, check the weight of the material delivered to the batch mixer by confirming scale reading accuracy. Step 2 is discharging the premix at multiple settings of the feeder. First, fill the hopper half full with premix. Set the feeder to maximum discharge. Run the feeder for a minute and collect the premix. After a minute, weigh the premix. Repeat this process additional times at different speeds or different percentage settings on the feeder. Write down the results each time. Step 3 is to make a graph. Using the data just collected, make a graph that shows the premix feed rate per minute at different speed settings from 0 to 100%. Display the graph near the feeder on the production floor. The last step is to adjust the feeder so that it discharges premix appropriately. Use the formula here, which takes the premix addition rate as specified by the premix producer, measured in grams per metric ton of flour, multiplied by the flour flow rate to get the result you want, the premix feed rate in grams per minute. The graph you made can be used as a guide for setting the feeder to the right speed setting. You should conduct the check weighing procedure prior to starting the mill to be sure the premix is in fact being released properly. This will be described in more detail soon. Please note, companies that manufacture feeders will often calibrate them after installation and sometimes periodically through the year. The optimum operating range for a feeder is between 30 and 70% of the calibration curve, as shown here. Remember, the composition of any pre-blends used in the fortification process must be taken into account when determining the premix feed rate. All feeders should receive periodic maintenance according to the manufacturer's instructions. Performance check results and maintenance services should be recorded and made available for examination by inspectors. The fourth activity for QA is checking premix feed rates, also known as check weighing or the check weigh procedure. If the flour is fortified continuously, the feed rate must be checked by production supervisors manually or via computer. In this slide you can see the supervisor collecting premix discharged from the feeder and then weighing the premix for check weighing calculations using the scale. To verify that volumetric feeders are adding premix at the rate entered into the mill's control panel, the amount discharged by the feeder in 1 minute needs to be collected and weighed. This should be done at the start of a shift and every 4 hours thereafter. Each time at least one sample is taken. Adjust the premix feed rate if it is greater than 10% above or below the target. Now let's watch a video that explains how to conduct the check weigh procedure. Please note that the units of measurement are from the US customary system rather than the metric system.
Hi, I'm Tyler with IPM Systems. Today Sean and I are going to demonstrate how to calculate your feed rate for your IPM Systems volumetric screw feeder. You need a scale, a beaker or a small container, a stopwatch, and a calculator. The first step is to zero out your scale so that you don't include the weight of your container that you're measuring the material in the calculation of the feed rate. So turn on the scale. Place a container on it, hit the button again to zero it out, and we're ready to go. So we'll turn on our feeder. Once you start the feeder, you'll want to let it run for a brief moment so that it can get up to full speed. Today we'll be taking a 15-second sample but if you can take a 30-second or a 1-minute sample, you'll increase your consistency. So let me get our stopwatch here. And Sean, you can start now. Stop. So we'll turn the feeder off, and we can place the beaker on the scale. We come up with 5.95 ounces. So we will take 5.95 times 4 to get us to a 1-minute time frame. Then we will multiply that times 60 to get an hour time frame. And then we will divide that by 16 for pounds, and the feed rate comes out to be 89.25 pounds per hour. And it's as simple as that to calculate your feed rate of your feeder. We'd like to thank you for watching this video today. If you have any questions about what was covered or anything else about your volumetric screw feeder, please feel free to contact us at our toll-free number, 855-328-9200, or you can also email us at service@ipm-sys.com.
If a loss-in-weight feeder is used instead of a volumetric feeder, check weighing is not as pertinent, since the feeder is connected through the mill control system to the flour production scales. The feed rate of the feeder will automatically adjust if needed. There are certain situations that necessitate checking the performance of all feeders, such as when the production line stops due to power outage or breakdown, the feeder restarted after cleaning, maintenance or calibration, and qualitative or quantitative tests indicate flour samples are not fortified correctly. The fifth QA activity is packaging, labeling, and storing fortified flour according to specifications of the fortification standard. The mill must ensure that the fortified flour is packaged and labeled according to the requirements put in place by the recipient country. Fortified flour should be packaged in a way to maximize protection of the added micronutrients against humidity and oxygen, and the flour protected against insect infestation. Label information is for the consumer, so it should be legible and presented in a language that the consumer can easily understand. The label should include an ingredient list, the lot number, the expiration or best before date, some indication that the flour is fortified, and contact details for the company that produced the flour. Additionally, the label shall display the National Food Fortification logo where applicable. Suggestions for appropriate storage of the fortified flour should appear on the label and inform the consumer to keep the fortified flour in a cool, dry place away from direct sunlight. The same conditions for storage apply to the producer when the flour is in the warehouse pending dispatch. Now let's look at a maize flour label from Central America. You will see on the left-hand side photo that flour is labeled as being fortified with iron. And then on the other photo on the right-hand side, you will see the ingredient statement, which covers corn, niacin, iron, thiamine, riboflavin, and folic acid. And immediately above the ingredient declaration is a nutrition information panel. This is a similar label but for wheat flour sold in the United States. The left-hand photograph states all-purpose enriched flour. In the US, enriched flour is another term that is commonly used for fortified flour. Here you can see some logos that have been instituted around the world to indicate that a product is fortified. These labels are placed on the packaging for the flour. The final QA procedure I'll cover is verifying premix usage against production of flour that should have been fortified. This is also called premix reconciliation. A reasonable way to be sure that a feeder has distributed the proper amount of premix over a set period of time, generally a month, is to conduct a premix reconciliation calculation. This exercise is relatively simple and does not require any equipment. The data points needed for the calculation include starting inventory of premix, amount of premix purchased during the period, ending premix inventory, and the total flour produced. To give you a better understanding of the concept, let's go through the example below together. This is the example of a 400 metric ton flour mill per day, operating for 25 days. There is a starting inventory of 2,140 kg. B is the amount of premix purchased, in this case 10,000 kg. C is the ending inventory at the end of the month, which is 10,040 kg. D is the amount of premix used in the month, which is the figure A plus B minus C. This results in an amount used of 2,100 kg. E is the total amount of fortified flour produced, in this case 10,000 metric tons. F is a calculation that demonstrates the actual addition rate of the premix, which is the amount D, 2,100 kg, divided by E, which is 10,000 for the tons, multiplied by 1,000, which gives us 210 grams per metric ton of flour that was fortified. The actual target rate based on the supplier specification is 200 grams. We can then calculate how close the actual addition rate is to the target rate following the calculation under H, and you will see here that this is 5% above the target rate. This record calculation is used by food control inspectors in the US and Canada for compliance inspections for fortification. Now let's move on to quality control. There are two primary QC activities that will be covered in this module. The first one is confirming that flour is fortified using a qualitative test. You will recall from the laboratory module that the iron spot test is the predominant method used to confirm that a flour sample is fortified. To conduct the iron spot test, you need to collect a sample of flour. Recalling that one method of fortifying flour is adding premix manually or via a feeder to a batch mixer. Most batch mixers, like the one you see here, are closed systems. Therefore, you are not able to obtain a sample of flour from the mixer. Rather, you need to wait until the batch of flour is transported to the packaging area to take the sample. If a flour mill adds premix in an ongoing or continuous manner, the frequency of sampling for the iron spot test depends on the reliability of the feeder. As a general rule, single samples should be collected at the start and end of a flour order or shift, and at least every 4 hours in between. Single samples are obtained at the end of the production line or from the flour packaging area. Single samples collected at the mill should amount to roughly 500 grams. At least 100 grams of this sample should be used for conducting the iron spot test. The remaining flour, or a portion thereof, is placed into a container designated for the composite sample of the flour order or shift. To get practical, let's watch a video that shows how the iron spot test is conducted. This flour sample is being tested for the presence of added iron from fortification. The miller uses 3 reagents. First, potassium thiocyanate solution, then dilute hydrochloric acid solution, finally hydrogen peroxide solution. It will take about 1 minute for the spots to appear if the flour is fortified. Because wheat flour has an intrinsic content of iron, even flour that is not fortified produces a red hue when conducting the iron spot test. It is the appearance of the red-pink spots that confirms fortification. The more spots you see, the higher the concentration of iron. To provide you with a clearer understanding, take a look at the photos on this slide of the iron spot test results at different iron fortification levels. 22 parts per million on the left-hand side, 44 parts per million, which is the target treatment level, and 88 parts per million, which is double treatment of the flour. After an iron spot test has been conducted, the results are written into a data collection form or a computer database, and that the portion of the flour is discarded. From this photograph you will see the recording results of the iron spot test on the QC manual. The second QC procedure is confirming that the amount of each micronutrient in flour complies with the fortification standard. Mill personnel do not typically need to collect additional samples for the quantitative assessment. A composite sample for each shift is prepared from a portion of each single sample that was originally collected for the qualitative test. The minimum number of single samples in one composite sample is 3, but typically more are included. Composite samples must be kept in tightly sealed containers. If the sample contains vitamin A, the container must be opaque to avoid degradation of the nutrient by light. At a minimum, the label should include the mill name, type of flour, batch or lot number, and the date. Periodically, a composite sample should be tested for the content of at least a single micronutrient, such as iron. The frequency is influenced by the production volume and technology of the mill. Quantitative testing on a composite sample should be done within 1 month to ensure optimum results. Unused samples, meaning those that are not sent for quantitative testing or collected by inspectors, can be disposed of after the shelf life of the flour. They are usually added to animal feeds, which contain bran and other byproducts. It is not necessary for each mill to invest in expensive equipment to conduct the quantitative tests. External analytical laboratories can be used. What is important, however, is for the mill to have a system in place to regularly confirm that the fortified flour adheres to the fortification standard. Results of quantitative tests should be systematically filed to allow for easy reporting, reviewing, and traceability of the fortified flour, if requested by the food authority inspectors. Record keeping. This is a very critical component of any internal monitoring program. It is imperative that flour millers maintain records regarding quality assurance and quality control practices. Each flour mill should have a written plan reflective of the national monitoring system requirements that outlines the monitoring protocols. It should include a list of data to be collected, outline of how the data should be collected, assign roles and responsibilities to mill staff, explain the frequency of data collection, and designate places within the mill for data storage. Ultimately, all records need to be accessible to mill managers and government authorities for audit and inspection visits. This concludes the session on internal monitoring. Next up, we'll talk about regulatory monitoring, which is facilitated primarily by government inspectors.